Good afternoon, everybody. Always wait for the magic eye of YouTube to come up, so I hope that you can all hear me. Hello, Angela and Ivan. Hello, George and Mickey, if she's there. Hello, Stella. And I'm sure Honey is somewhere around. Today's passage is Zechariah chapter 6, from verse 9 to 15. Sometimes you look at a passage and think, wow, okay, for once this is pretty straightforward. And I guess it is pretty straightforward, but what can happen then is we find those rabbit holes. So I spent quite a bit of time going down rabbit holes and branching off here and branching off there, and then realizing that this doesn't really relate to Zechariah in the end very much. So I've kind of chosen a couple of rabbit holes that we're going to go down together. And it's mostly looking at some passages that relate to this that tell a bit of the story. So I've put those passages there in the comments and we will read through them. But I think to start just by going through the passage from Zechariah. So we know that Zechariah's visions have finished now, those particular set of 8 visions, and he is now giving a prophecy. The word of the Lord came to me, the mark that the prophecy is happening. Take silver and gold from the exiles. There, if you're using the New International Version, you've got funny little square brackets on silver and gold. That's because silver and gold aren't actually in the original Hebrew. The Hebrew says take from the exiles. And they've just assumed that because we talk about silver and gold later, that means silver and gold. From the exiles Heldai, Tobijah, and Jedaiah, who have arrived from Babylon. We don't know anything else about those people. We can't find those particular people mentioned anywhere. The names are names that you see in the lists of priests, so most probably they were priestly people, Levites at least, who were collecting the gold and the silver. Go the same day to the house of Josiah, son of Zephaniah. This one's a bit more confusing because Josiah was the name of an early king and Zephaniah was the name of an early priest as well as a prophet. So we're not too sure who Josiah, son of Zephaniah, was. But anyway, it was to go to his house and there to take the silver and gold and make a crown. Now the NIV here has crown in singular, but the Hebrew is actually plural. Take the silver and gold and make crowns and set them on the head of the high priest, Joshua, son of Jehozadak. Okay, we've met Joshua, son of Jehozadak before. We know who he is. And we had a vision about him earlier as well. And now verse 12, tell him this is what the Lord Almighty says. Here is the man whose name is the branch, and he will branch out from his place and build the temple of the Lord. Okay, I always wonder how Joshua would have felt when he heard this. And he is the branch, and he will branch out. And building the temple of the Lord, okay, that makes sense. It is he who will build the temple of the Lord, and he will be clothed with majesty and will sit and rule on his throne. Now this must have struck Joshua as very odd. And he will be a priest on his throne, and there will be harmony between the two. So this is where there's general agreement that it is a prophecy towards Jesus, who will be the priest and the king on the throne. Obviously in the Jewish line it couldn't be like that because the priests came from the tribe of Levi and the kings came from the tribe of Judah, but Jesus combined them as a messianic prophecy, which apparently even the Jews took as messianic, not only Christians. But obviously the Jews don't see it pointing to our Jesus. Then he says the crown or the crowns will be given to Heldai, Tobijah, Jedaiah, and Hen, son of Zephaniah, as a memorial in the temple of the Lord. Hen could just mean the gracious one, so it may not be a name, or it may be another name for Josiah, we're not too sure, but possibly Josiah was the hospitable one. He went there to the house to make this thing or these things, and the crowns are now to be given back to them, where they are to be kept in the temple of the Lord as a memorial. And this is part of what we're going to track back now, this idea of the memorial in the temple. In verse 15, those who are far away will come and help to build the temple of the Lord, and you will know that the Lord Almighty has sent me to you. This will happen if you diligently obey the Lord your God. Verse 15 is leading even more on into Messianic times and into our times as we realize the church, the body of Christ, is the new temple. And he says, "Do you not know that you are the temple of God?" And as the Gentiles and the Jews are joined into the temple, this is a prophecy to that further time. Again, I wonder how it would have felt to be Joshua, to suddenly have this crown put on his head. It's a unusual crown. The Israelites, the Jewish people at that time, had a crown which was more like a turban, and it was very similar to the priest's turban. I'm not sure exactly how it looked, but the metal crown, the thing that we tend to associate with a crown with gold and silver and gems and all of that thing, wasn't really an Israelite thing, wasn't a Hebrew tradition. Other kings had crowns like that. So this is a distinctive Hebrew word that applies to a crown made out of precious metal and out of precious things. And so this isn't even the ordinary crown that perhaps Solomon might have worn. This is something very special that is being given to Joshua. And let alone the fact that there's not only one crown, but several crowns, which he is expected to wear. I want us to follow back this idea of the gold and the silver and the idea of memorial. I'm going to read these passages. So we're going to go back to Exodus chapter 28. Exodus 28. If you are quick, you can follow with me. I will try and not move too fast. Exodus 28, 11 to 12. And this is the making of the priestly garments and the ephod. And they are told, "Engrave the names of the sons of Israel on the 2 stones the way a gem cutter engraves a seal. Then mount the stones in gold filigree settings, and fasten them on the shoulder pieces of the ephod as memorial stones for the sons of Israel. Aaron is to bear the names on his shoulders as a memorial before the Lord." So this here, a memorial before the Lord, as we see in Zechariah, where the crown is to be left in the temple, or the crowns, as a memorial. Now, all this gold and silver, I want to read as Moses set up the tabernacle. I know that all of us listening are probably quite well aware of what was in the tabernacle, to be aware of the fact that although the furniture was made out of wood, most of the stuff was coated over with gold or with bronze or brass, and so it was very valuable, very precious. And so we're going now Exodus 40, so just moving over a few pages, Exodus 40 from verse 20. And to think that these are the precious bits of furniture that were in the tabernacle and then later on moved to the temple. That Moses took the testimony, that's the 10 Commandments, and placed it in the ark, attached the poles to the ark, and put the atonement cover over it. Then he brought the ark into the tabernacle and hung the shielding curtain and shielded the ark of the testimony as the Lord commanded him. Moses placed the table in the tent of meeting on the north side of the tabernacle outside the curtain and set out the bread on it before the Lord as the Lord commanded him. He placed the lampstand in the tent of meeting opposite the table on the south side of the tabernacle and set up the lamps before the Lord as the Lord commanded him. Moses placed the gold altar in the tent of meeting in front of the curtain and burned fragrant incense on it as the Lord commanded him. Then he put up the curtain at the entrance to the tabernacle. He set the altar of burnt offering near the entrance to the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, and offered on it burnt offerings and grain offerings as the Lord commanded him. Now, I'm not going to read passages that relate back to that, but many of these offerings were made as memorial offerings before the Lord. He placed the basin between the tent of meeting and the altar and put water in it for washing. And Moses and Aaron and his sons used to wash their hands and feet. They washed whenever they entered the tent of meeting or approached the altar, as the Lord commanded Moses. Then Moses set up the courtyard around the tabernacle and altar, and put up the curtain at the entrance to the courtyard. And so Moses finished the work. So these are the significant items in the tabernacle, mostly very precious, covered with gold, covered with precious metals. Then we find a different sort of memorial, and this is from Numbers chapter 50, I have for some reason written 33, but it's actually from Numbers chapter 31. Numbers 31, 50 to 54. Numbers 31, verse 50 to 54. The Israelites have been at war and they have conquered their enemy. And they say, so we have brought as an offering to the Lord the gold articles each of us have acquired, armlets, bracelets, signet rings, earrings, and necklaces, to make atonement for ourselves before the Lord. Moses and Eleazar the priest accepted from them the gold, all the crafted articles, all the gold from the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds that Moses and Eleazar presented as a gift to the Lord, weighed 16,750 shekels. Each soldier had taken plunder for himself. Moses and Eleazar the priest accepted the gold from the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds and brought it into the tent of meeting as a memorial for the Israelites before the Lord. So there again they brought all of this precious gold that they had captured in their raid, and in memory of the fact that God had been with them and that God had led them on this, they donated some of it to the temple, so to speak, and it was put into the temple treasury. Right, now we fast forward quite a bit. That's all the time of Moses. We're fast forwarding to 2 Kings chapter 20. And now we are reaching the end of the era of the kingdoms, just before the conquering that happens. And we are reading from 2 Kings 20, from verse 12 to 17. At that time, Merodach-Baladan, son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent Hezekiah letters and a gift because he had heard of Hezekiah's illness. Hezekiah received the messengers and showed them all that was in his storehouses, the silver, the gold, the spices, and the fine oil, his armory, and everything found among his treasures. Now we know where some of those treasures came from. There was nothing in his palace or in all his kingdom that Hezekiah did not show them. Then Isaiah the prophet went to Hezekiah and asked, what did those men say, and where did they come from? From a distant land, Hezekiah replied. They came from Babylon. The prophet asked, what did they see in your palace? They saw everything in my palace, Hezekiah said. There is nothing among my treasures that I did not show them. Then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, hear the word of the Lord. The time will surely come when everything in your palace and all that your fathers have stored up until this day will be carried off to Babylon. Nothing will be left, says the Lord. Okay, and so it carries on. So now we have this history of all of the silver and gold and the precious stuff being made into ornaments and important parts of the tabernacle, the stuff that has been given in memory of God's help in battle. And now it has been exposed to the foreign nation, the nation that is hostile to them. And Isaiah says, now you have asked for trouble. And I actually probably should have put in a passage now which speaks about the king of Babylon taking the treasure, but I don't have that one. That we know that they did, they came, they took everything out of the temple, and they took it back to Babylon. And in due course, Babylon was conquered by the Persians, and the Persians sent the Jews back to Israel to rebuild the temple. And so there are a number of references to this, but I've chosen the one from Ezra 6. So we're looking at Ezra 6 from the second half of verse 3, which is the letter that Darius's decree. Let the temple be rebuilt as a place to present sacrifices, and let its foundations be laid. It is to be 90 feet high and 90 feet wide, with 3 courses of large stones and 1 of timbers. The costs are to be paid by the royal treasury. Also, the gold and silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took from the temple in Jerusalem and brought to Babylon, are to be returned to their places in the temple in Jerusalem. They are to be deposited in the house of God. And so there is the instruction. And if we read, we see that in fact that did happen. Those things were brought back. And Ezra, who notes very carefully that they recorded and they checked that everything that left Babylon arrived back in Jerusalem. Nobody swiped anything on the way. They were all very careful about it. And so all of that stuff is brought back. So now we have the context where Zechariah is told by God, go to these priests and ask them for silver and gold, because all of that silver and gold has been returned. We don't know if these tables and the altars and the Ark of the Covenant were all in one piece or if it had been melted down. We don't really hear about it again. But whatever it is, they are asked to give of that silver and gold to Zechariah. And Zechariah must now melt it down and he makes crowns for Joshua. And these crowns now go into the temple as a memorial. And so it is very symbolic, actually, that those original memorials that were there as a reminder of battle, reminder of the religious practices of the Jews and the religious duties of the Jews, God says, take that gold and silver, and now I want you to make crowns for Joshua, who is going to be the priest king. And we know that here is this memorial is a memorial going forward as much as a memorial going backwards. It is a thing that says this is for the king who is coming, who will be the king priest. And you had your past, you had your battles, you had the religious items, the religious artifacts. But going forward, your future is this king. And so we just have to end up with the passage from Revelation. And I think it's in the cross references. So some of you might have found it there. It's Revelation 19, verse 11 to 12. There's a prophecy that John the evangelist saw of Jesus. I saw heaven standing open, and there before me was a white horse, whose rider is called Faithful and True. With justice he judges and makes war. His eyes are like blazing fire, and on his head are many crowns. He has a name written on him that no one knows but he himself. All right, that carries on, and generally we see that as a prophecy to Jesus coming again, symbolic, riding on his white horse and wearing many crowns, just as we have Joshua doing here in the prophecy of Zechariah. So I found it an interesting, almost a rabbit hole, but it's just so cool to see how it does all fit together. The movement from the ancient religious practice to the conquering and the political strength of the nation of Israel, to now this different sort of crown, not their usual crown, a crown of precious jewels and precious metals, but many crowns that ultimately we see as representing Jesus. And of course, we can go into why many crowns and what do the many crowns represent, but I think that that is enough for now. So thank you for joining. I hope it made sense to everybody. Those of us that are going to go into Zoom will meet now in Zoom to discuss it. But we'll also pop that up live. So if you are watching but you don't want to Zoom in with us, feel free to watch the discussion on YouTube. And if you're watching on video, you should find the discussion on YouTube as well. So thank you, and God bless you all.